You're tuned in to the Behind the Ears podcast with Uncle Danny and Mr. Chris, because everybody does Disney differently. The Behind the Ears podcast crew would like to thank the following sponsors for their generous support. Expedition Roasters is the artisanal roaster of specialty Disney-inspired coffees. Why not brew some of the magic at your home? Some of our coffees include Skipper's Brew, Ghoulish Delight, Enchanted Tiki Coconut, Redhead Rum, and many other unique roasts. Our coffees are certified gluten and allergen-free and feature unique custom artwork by guest artists. Expedition Roasters offers an adventure in every bag. So start your adventure today by visiting us online at expeditionroasters.com. That's expeditionroasters.com. And Behind Ears listeners, be sure to take advantage of this exclusive offer and save 20% on your first purchase with code EARS20. That's EARS20 at expeditionroasters.com. Brew your happy place. Do you have a little one and don't want to bring your stroller from home? Have you destroyed a stroller in the past from all the wear and tear from a Disney vacation? Well, Kingdom Strollers is a great place to rent a great quality stroller at a reasonable price. Kingdom Strollers is a Disney-featured stroller provider, which means they will deliver it right to your resort, even if you're not there. Same thing for picking it up at the end of your trip. So if you're in need of an affordable stroller rental during your next Orlando trip, consider renting from a Disney-trusted stroller company. Visit kingdomstrollers.com for more information. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the Behind Ears podcast. I'm your host, Mr. Chris. Uncle Danny is not out of bed yet. And I joke around about that, but actually this is something of a pop-up show, a special edition, if you may, of the Behind Ears podcast. I have got with me today Katie, and she is a former Disney College Program cast member. And if you've heard our shows from earlier this week, I kind of alluded to the fact that not only were we going to talk to our guests that have just come back from their spring break vacation, and they shared with us some interesting tidbits about their vacation. Katie actually reached out to me and said, hey, guess what? I was a cast member during that particular time a few years back, and I'd like to be able to tell people what it's like to be a cast member during one of the busiest times of the year. And I said, you know what? That would be absolutely a really cool thing to do. Take into consideration, you know, we always hear about the guest perspective, but we don't always hear about what it's like for a cast member to go through this level of craziness. And so unfortunately, Katie's schedule is not really conducive to being on in the evening. So I said, you know what? Let's go ahead and try a special morning show. We both have a cup of Expedition Roasters coffee right here, and she's drinking Enchanted Tiki. No, wait, you're drinking Ghoulish Delight.
Ghoulish Delight.
And I am drinking Dark Side Roast. And
cheers.
So cheers, clink. This is how we start a Saturday. And so, you know, it just goes to show they are not just our sponsor, but we really do use their product. Our guests actually use their product. It is an absolutely great thing. That is a special plug just for them. All right. So everybody, this is one of those shows where it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more lax. And yeah, I was joking. Uncle Danny just wasn't available for this particular time. He has actually got a full schedule for today, he was telling me. And so but I joke around. I love my co-host, my host, my fellow host, as we both put it. He and I always joke around about that as well. He is probably one of the best people I could ever do this with, and I just absolutely love him. But today we got Katie on, and so Katie, why don't you give us a little bit of rundown who you are and what do you do?
Okay, so good morning, everybody. I hope everyone's having an awesome Saturday so far. If you don't know who I am, my name is Katie O'Shea. I live currently in north of Boston. Back in 2015, during my junior year of college, I participated in the Disney College program in the spring semester. So what that was is instead of going and doing a typical semester of college, I actually went down and worked at Walt Disney World in the Future World section of Epcot And while I was doing that, I was also taking classes that were through the program and also through my college back home. It was an incredible experience. It was a dream come true for me, something that I had always wanted to do since I was a little girl. And the first time I went to Disney World. And yeah, it was just unbelievable. So I have been seeing in the group a lot of people saying that they've got accepted or they have questions. So please, if you ever have any questions or you need tips, tricks, anything, do not hesitate to reach out to me. I would be more than happy to assist you with anything that you might need.
Well, that is excellent. That is cool. So cool. Now that you've actually graduated, though, what are you doing now? And feel free to give a shout out to your current employer. You know, I hear that your boss is a pretty big fan of the show as well.
She is. We both listen to it in the office while we're working. And then sometimes, we might get into little bickering moments because we might not agree, but most of the time we agree. And so we try to listen to it as much as we can while it's, not crazy busy. So I graduated school back in December of 2016, and then I technically walked in May of 2017. And now I currently work for a company called Boston Harbor Cruises. So we have all different kinds of cruises that also run year round as well as seasonal. And what I do in that office is I work in the group sales department. So I basically book school field trips, camp outings, corporate outings, and things of that matter. And it's also super helpful that my boss is a crazy Disney nerd like I am, and we're always going back and forth on recommendations for each other, assistance with getting fast passes and things like that. So, yeah, and that would be Andrea Dunlap. Hello, Andrea. How are you?
There you go. Andrea, thanks for having us there at your place of business. That is really super cool. I do listen. I listen to other podcasts as well. I mean, I think every podcaster listens to other podcasts. I listen to them in the background during my work when I'm not on phone calls and stuff like that. And it is actually a great way to basically spend some of your downtime during the day. So, Katie, why don't you tell us a little bit about, the experience of getting into the Disney College program, and why don't you tell us some of the responsibilities that you had, and just let's share a little bit about what you've done, and we'll see if some of our listeners today maybe even have a few questions or comments about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the process was, the only nerve-wracking thing about it was the waiting game, where I had submitted all of the paperwork that I needed online, done the interviews, and then basically for 2 months you have to wait to hear if you got in or not. And it's awful. You're checking your email constantly every single day. You're just driving yourself to the brink of insanity, just waiting. And then when that moment comes, you're just completely full of emotions and happiness. It's awesome. So what I did when I was down there was I was a custodian. I worked in the Future World section of Epcot. So every day I worked in a different area. So I wasn't always just confined to one specific place in Future World. So say on a Tuesday, I would be working over in the seas. And then on Thursdays, I would end up over at the land or at the front of the parks near the buses and things like that. And it also depended on what kind of shifts that you had. So if you were a restaurant, then you'd work a specific area where, the restaurants are located, obviously. Or if you worked the streets, you had a lot of movement. And that's what I really liked about the position that I had, was that you weren't confined to one specific place all day, and you got to just wander around and walk around and get active. Like I tell people all the time, I lost almost 30 pounds on what I call the DCP diet, because I would check my Fitbit at the end of a shift and it was like, you walked 6 miles. And I'm like, oh, great.
It's almost conditioning for a Run Disney event, if you ask me.
Exactly.
Oh, no, that's actually quite interesting, and that's actually kind of interesting to hear that they have you doing different things, even like within your particular assignment, just to not keep you bored. And I think that's I think that kind of takes some cues from a lot of other companies where they try to make sure that their cast members don't get bored, because what happens when you get bored, you become less attentive and you do less,
right.
Lesser work, or you do not as not as sound quality of work as well. Now, if for your particular role, obviously you rolled around in between different areas. I'm kind of interested to hear what kind of guest interaction did you end up happening? Because I mean, I know that, guests interact with pretty much any types of cast members that are out there. I mean, if you have a name tag, they'll talk to you about something or another. What kind of experiences did you have that?
So there was a lot of guest interaction for me because what our managers basically told us was that when a guest is walking through the park, most of the time the first person that they see are the custodians. So we had to kind of memorize all the different times for when certain things were, because those were the most frequently asked questions of us. When was this parade, or where was this character meeting at what time? So we would actually get a little pamphlet. Kind of a secret. I don't know. I think it's pretty well known though. So you get a pamphlet and it would tell you all the different times for when specific characters were meeting, when certain shows were, and things like that, so that we could just quickly open it up and answer it for people. And then most of the time it was just directions. So I always kept a couple park maps on hand just in case. And then by like my second month in, I knew Future World like the back of my hand. I knew where, like anything was located basically. And to this day, I went back for the first time in October after my program, and I still knew like every single trash can. I knew where every bathroom is. I knew where the best bathroom and the worst bathrooms were. My friends were making fun of me because every time one of them would have to go to a bathroom, I'm like, no, don't use that one. Go use that one.
Oh, no, that's funny. I mean, okay, this sounds weird, but we all know that there are websites and Facebook groups that are most likely dedicated to telling guests where the best bathrooms are.
Oh my gosh, there are.
I mean, it sounds strange, but let's face it, you're there all day.
Mm-hmm.
You need to go. It's a human thing.
Yes.
And everybody wants to know, where's the best place for that sort of thing. And actually, it's interesting, especially since you just kind of mentioned that you're kind of one of the first people that guests would interact with. Christine was basically asking, how did you find the general public? Were they pretty kind, or a little on the rude side, or maybe a little bit of both? I mean, what was your general reaction to the guest experience, so to speak?
I would say for the most part, the guest experience that I saw was extremely positive. There were, each day there were a handful of rude guests or negative. And what I just had to try to remember and not let it get to me was that, there's always going to be one bad apple out of the bunch. And the best part is that, after all these years, the most guest interactions that I can remember to this day were all the positive ones, where I can barely remember all the rude people that did it. And I mean, a lot of the time it was that, there was a line for the restroom, or they were dumping out, they were putting something in the trash can while I was changing it or something like that. So it was very like minor stuff. But then again, I also have to remember, it's really hot. They've probably been here for, all day or all week or something like that. So it happens. It happens to everybody. They're only human. And that's what I always try to, stress to people when they're going down there at a very high volume time, is that, the cast members, they're human. They're going to have bad days and good days. Just, try your best, spread a little kindness, say please, thank you, all of that. And, because I was in that position, I try to do that when I go to the parks as a guest, because I know how hard they work. I know that they've been on their feet all day. They're exhausted. So it's just the littlest things that can make their whole day turn around. And my personal favorites were when I'd be in a restroom and I'd be cleaning, and then somebody would tap me on the shoulder and they would just say, thank you for all that you're doing. Like, it was those little things that just could make my whole day. And I would say to myself, I can't have a bad day for the rest of the day because this woman said thank you for mopping up a sink or mopping up the floor.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that, because, the fact of the matter is that I think sometimes the guest experience, we tend to forget that every every cast member that is on stage is a cast member on stage. I mean, quite literally, in the sense as Walt would want it to be. And, you're there to give the guests the best experience possible. And sometimes the guests can make or break the day for the cast members. And I know from my family and I, even before my wife became a cast member, it was more along the lines of, you know what, just be kind to people as well as those that are serving us and making our day great. And I think that's a very special tip, so to speak. I mean, I know that I keep hearing, and I mean no disrespect to fellow guests when I say this in any way, shape, or form, but every once in a while you see something on a Facebook page that just kind of makes it sound like, I'm going to go ahead and say it. It makes it sound like there are people that are entitled because, they spent thousands of dollars on a Disney vacation. It's true. We all spend thousands of dollars on a Disney vacation. But, the fact of the matter is that the people that serve us, they're human too. And sometimes just to give them a smile and, a thank you, a kind word, and even better yet, and you can tell me how this works if you can, but even to let, guest services know that they've had a good interaction with a cast member. And because it's my understanding that, if guests do that, cast members really actually do get recognized in the background.
Yeah, absolutely. They have the cast compliments. It has gotten a lot bigger over the years compared to when I was there because, I mean, they still had it. It wasn't like as advanced as it is now, but people would go to guest relations and say, hey, so-and-so was fantastic, that can you please thank them for us or something? And then cast members also have a very similar thing where other cast members can award them or give them the recognition that, some of them deserve when they go above and beyond certain tasks. So for that was always, my push to work harder, be happier, and just do what I do best much better because it gave me a boost and made me realize like this is why I'm here because I worked really hard to deserve it. And it's little things like that Disney as a company does to show the employees how much they appreciate them and how much they love them and they want them to just continue to grow.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And actually, John basically makes a comment, actually partially a question, custodial work can be dirty work.
Yeah, I can.
You can. I think we all know it. We all know it. He asks, do you think it may have reduced some of the magic for you? And I'll even add, back when you were a cast member as well as now that you're, a guest returning back, how does that work for you? And has it changed your perception on things?
It did. I really thought it would going down there. And that was my biggest fear, that I was going to take the magic away and that I wouldn't look at Disney, the same way that I did before or I do now. But it really didn't, even though I would, go through the tunnels of Epcot or, go into, the back to clean up, to get equipment to clean up like body spills or something. The nice term of saying it, body spills. And yes, I did have a lot of those in the 4 months or 5 months that I was there.
Sorry.
Even like after a day of just cleaning those up, I still just felt so magical and so happy. And then I would go as a guest on my days off and it was like nothing changed. I couldn't believe it. I think there was only one instance where it was kind of ruined for me, and I blame myself for it. I had gone down to the tunnels to use cast member restroom, and I was watching Chip and Dale come out of the tunnel, and they didn't have their heads on. And I just kind of stood there like, what? No.
Hashtag triggered.
The character attendant could tell that this was like my first time seeing something like this. And she was like, I am so sorry.
Oh,
and then I to like pull myself together. I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Oh my gosh, that my friend is funny. I mean, I don't even know what to say. But I will tell you this: Anita basically mentions, hey, she gives you a lot of credit, and she's like, I know working with the public takes a lot of patience.
Oh,
She
thank
loves
you,
your attitude.
Anita.
So let me also mention. Leanne also mentions here, she was like, I teach my daughters to thank the custodians for keeping everything so nice and clean, and they now do it on their own at the young ages of 6 and 3. And you know what?
Thank you, Leanne. Thank you. Because I do it myself as a guest when I go to the parks now, and just to see their faces light up, it just takes me back to those times when it made me feel really good. So thank you for teaching your children that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I can agree. We do that ourselves, for our family. And, I think that when you're nice to the cast members, first off, I've said this before, I'll say it again. Guests who go in looking for magical experiences purposely will never find a real magical experience. For guests that go in that just try to be magical for the cast members, sometimes gets a good return. And it's in the form of some magic as well. I also want to make a comment here. Christine also mentions, this past summer we had the most amazing mousekeeping lady at the Art of Animation, and we made sure to let higher ups know how much they appreciated her, and she was absolutely
awesome. That's awesome, Christine. I
really truly believe in the power of feedback, positive or negative. And there was one time we had just a great experience at a restaurant, and I saw one of the supervisors, and I said, hey, listen, I just want to let you know we had an awesome experience. And the manager was kind of looked at me like, are you serious? Only because it's like, I'm sure that he had tons of people always come up to him and say they had crappy experiences. But sometimes it's, you just gotta do that. And, it's just like so many people these days don't say please and thank you anymore. So many people.
True. It's so true. That's one of the first things I say to any cast member I come across that I need assistance with. Like, excuse me, please, and then thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's just little things like that.
Absolutely. So let's get into more of the idea of spring break. Now, as she takes a breath, she takes a pause because she realizes that all the therapy that now the funny part about it is, in setting the stage here over the past couple of weeks, right around Easter, before and after, we have been seeing crowds that have been epic in proportion. We heard from Andrea and Jesse the other day about how, even though it was crowded, one stayed off-site, one stayed on-site. They both had an epically awesome time, which I was glad to hear. Now, from your perspective, and I don't even know really where to start from. I'm sure that
I don't know either. I really don't know either.
I mean, because from a custodial perspective, you're dealing with an extraordinary large volume. Now, I also sit back and I realize here for a second, I can only imagine that you're dealing with large volumes, and just like anybody who's working in retail or food service or entertainment or ride operations in transportation, they're dealing with the largest number of people, and one of them have a different type of challenge. For you, I'm going to go ahead and face it. Keeping things hygienic is extraordinarily important in the parks. You obviously have a very difficult job when you're dealing with tens of thousands of people, and the amount of waste and trash that we all produce. Let's face it, it's one of those things. It's not pretty to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it, but it's a true statement. So, why don't you start off? I mean, tell me what kind of real challenges did you see as the crowds increased in number?
So what I didn't realize until I had gotten there was spring break basically consists of 2 months straight. There's no breaks in between. So you have March where you're seeing a high volume of college students, and, their spring breaks are always, different throughout the month of March. You're also seeing competitions increase with either cheerleading, volleyball, or any kind of, whatever they usually do. And then April, you have grades K through 12, and then their spring breaks are on completely different weeks and schedules. So basically, for the entire month, you feel like you're in the Hunger Games. That's the best way to describe it. That is the best way to describe it. You are in the Hunger Games. You have to prepare yourself before you even get on the bus to go to work. What I like to do was I would stretch in the mornings. I would do a couple jumping jacks. I would stretch out my arms just to prepare myself like I was getting ready for battle. And what the college program does is most of the time, for one of the great things that they do is they have classes that you can take when you're down there in case if, your college, requires that you take some form of a class while you're there. So they, shut those down completely for 2 weeks because your hours will increase because of, the high volume and things like that. They will also try to double up the staff for specific areas where it is very known to have an extremely high volume of guests. So there's certain restrooms that will have, double the staff in there and things like that. And so you're just working nonstop. And then when your lunch break rolls around, you're just like, yes, relax for half an hour. And then you get right back in there. And for college program students, most of us would work towards the mid-afternoon end of the day. So my hours were normally 3 to 10, or if there was extra magic hours, 3 to 11, 2 to 11, or things like that. So that was also a really big rush depending on where you were location wise and when the park closes, because then it's literally a sea of people and you're trying to go the complete opposite way. So you're trying to swim upstream, and most of the time you have a trash barrel or what I call the banana boats, which is just a base, giant trash can, and you're trying to maneuver your way. So yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. And then I sprained my ankle in the middle of spring break month.
Oh no. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, that was a fun day. So I was working backstage of the land because that's where we kept most of our, restroom supplies, paper towels, toilet paper, things like that. And I was rushing and that was my fault that I was running around and rushing because I wanted to get everything in there and get everything stocked. And I completely missed the curb. And I was holding 2 paper towel rolls. Those went flying into the air.
Oh no.
And I so for some reason, they had that area open to guests, I think because of the high volume that was going on in Epcot on that specific day. So there were guests going into the backstage area, and I was completely mortified because I didn't want anybody to see what had happened. So then I had to crawl into a break room backstage. And then luckily one of my coworkers was there. And my managers came, rolling in as fast as they could. They brought me over. What I really liked about the company of Disney is that they have a doctors on site and this medical facility where they can do x-rays and things like that. So instead of having to go all the way to the hospital, they took me right over there to get me x-rayed and take really good care of me. So for that, I really appreciated a lot. So then I got to start for the second half of spring break week, sit down duty, also known as light duty. And basically what that entails is for 8 hours a day, you're sitting down, not doing any, you can't, cause you can't stand or walk around or anything like that. You're folding napkins for the restaurants in the World Showcase. You are, so for the marathons that were going on over in Disneyland and in Disney World, because there's still a handful of them, we were filling up the runners' goodie bags with stuff. And then I also got to hop to different resorts So I got to do a couple shifts at Coronado. I got to do a couple shifts with Wide World of Sports. So that was really interesting because I also got to work in different locations and I wasn't stuck in one specific location all day. But after a couple weeks of that, I was able to get right back in and I had never felt so happy to be working a restroom shift in my life after I got out of light duty.
You definitely, just from our conversation here, I mean, you definitely seem like a person that interacts extraordinarily well with people. And I think that's pretty awesome. So I want to ask you to kind of go out on a limb here, if you can, and you are more than welcome to plead the Fifth Amendment on. But can you give us an example of, a really crappy experience with a guest? And by the way, I realize now that when you talk custodian, to call it a crappy experience with a guest, it's very punny, and I didn't necessarily mean it that way. And
Thank you, Dan.
Yes,
but that's
Mr.
okay because
Chris.
it's perfect.
Mr. Chris, you need to start thinking before you actually talk. But it also goes to show we're not scripted, and everybody knows that. So I'll stick with it. What kind of bad experience have you had with the guests? I mean, and I'm asking this from a tale of trying to explain to people what to not do, even if it's by accident.
Now I know the perfect one. So I was working in the Seas one day. And for everybody that doesn't know, that's the best restroom in Epcot, but you didn't hear it from me. So I was working in the Seas restroom that day, and I had just finished, cleaning it up. It was spotless. I was super proud of myself. Like, I did a really good job. This looks great. All right, let's move on. And there was this little boy that was coming out of one of the stalls who had taken the toilet paper and kind of created like a tail, and he had put some of it in his pants, and he started to kind of do circles around the restroom and over by the sinks, and then he started to grab the paper towels and was running around with that. He was just having the time of his life. And I couldn't even say anything. I just stood there mortified. I just clammed up, and I didn't want to say like the wrong thing or something. So I was just like, yeah, great. And then what I assume is his mother that had come out. She, took the paper towel out of his hand and took the toilet paper out of his pants, and they walked out. She did not apologize, try to clean it up in any way. She just took it out and walked him out of there. And I was just like, okay, this isn't too bad. There's no poop anywhere. That's all that matters.
I mean, it's unfortunate that you end up having to waste a bunch of paper products for this young guest's experience. But it is kind of funny how you put it, though. He was having the time of his life in the bathroom that you cleaned up. I think, that's.
Well, I'm standing right there.
Well, you're
right
there.
That's
actually quite. I can almost picture it too. And do I want to say that it's a boy thing? I don't know, but
I don't know. I didn't see any, young girls doing it, but just that one time. And I was just, I wish somebody could have seen me just standing there with my broom and pan, like, everything is fine. This is okay.
It's almost like you feel like Mr. Incredible in the beginning of Mr. Incredible. It's like, I just cleaned up this mess. Can't we just have this clean for just 5 minutes?
Yeah.
No, boy.
I had a lot of those moments, especially in the restroom over by Test Track Emission Space. That one was, I called that restroom 666 because every time I worked there, it felt like I was constantly in hell, and that there was no way around it, because you go from 1 second, it was completely empty and you have time to just clean it up and do the things that you got to do. And then out of nowhere, just nonstop guests flying out the door. And it all kind of fluctuated with when specific rides would get out. So when, a huge group from Test Track came out and then a huge group from Mission Space came out, it was basically that.
Are you referring to the one that's over like just outside of Mouse Gear?
Yes.
Okay.
So you go through the East Breezeway,
Right.
and it's immediately on the right-hand side. Straight
Right.
ahead from it, you can see Test Track, and then if you look a little to the left, that's where Mission Space is. That one. That one.
Yep. Okay. Now, so for some reason, this question just popped in my mind. I'm very curious. Do you think that that something like that is more difficult to deal with because of the sheer volume of the attractions that are right there, like Test Track and Mission Space, and how dynamic they are in a sense of, hey, you're getting spun like you're in a dry cycle,
Yeah.
or you're going extraordinarily fast and being jerked around, back and forth type of thing for Test Track. Do you think that has anything to do with it? I have to ask. People coming out aftermath.
Yeah, definitely. Especially because those two are some of the most popular in Epcot. The lines are also extremely long, and there's a lot of people that they don't want to get out of line to use the restroom, so they just keep holding it. And then when they finally get out, they just run, go sprinting. And that's the first one that they see. And then it's the same way when you're getting out of Mission Space and say you do orange and you don't feel your best. And you think something's kind of off, and so you don't really know what to do, and then you see it, and you just run. You just run.
I can see that, and the reason why I say it like that in such a humorous manner is, how can I put it nicely? There was a time that I used to be able to go on Mission Space, and was known as the orange side, the spinning side, with my daughter 7 times in a row without any issue.
How did you survive?
Well,
how did you survive?
The 7th time, my daughter did say that I looked a little green, and we decided that was it. I think I can do it about 3 or 4 times now before I finally hit my threshold, and then I think it's just because of age now. I'm not as young as I used to be, and but it's still. Yeah, I think it's actually. I actually think it's quite funny. Okay, so forgive me, and everybody's going to get grossed out by this question, but have you ever had to clean up from Mission Space by chance?
No. Thankfully, I don't know how, by the grace of God, I never got assigned that specific location. However, one of the other rides in Epcot that sometimes it'll get more body spill action than Mission Space. Believe it or not, this is going to blow your mind. Spaceship Earth.
What?
Spaceship Earth. I had to go up there to clean some spills here and there. Most of the time, like the spills that I cleaned up were on the street or on a sidewalk or something like that. But because it's a completely different thing when you have to clean it up on a ride, and sometimes it can take a little bit longer, and especially because they have to shut the ride down completely for safety reasons, so you can't go on it while it's moving around. And I can kind of understand why, because when you go through the first part after they take your picture for the ending part and before you get into the caveman section, they do that thing where it goes from like all the stars to like this video, and that can be kind of woozy for people, and that's when it gets tricky.
I would have never thought of that. I mean, that is
Yeah.
Now you realize now everybody who rides Spaceship Earth from this point on is going to go up there and then go, remember when Katie was talking? Everybody's going to do that now. And this is just one of those things where it's going to be one of those little hidden secrets that people are going to say, oh my God.
When I went in October, I had met up with one of my old partners there, because that's how, you would start your day, is that you would get assigned a partner that was in the same location with you. And my favorite partner still works down there. And so when I went in October, we had met up a couple times, and we had gone to Epcot, and we were on Spaceship Earth, and he goes, remember that time you had to clean that blank up over here? I'm like, yep.
Oh
But
my
the
God.
best part of it was as I was leaving and I had, like trash bags and gloves, people were clapping for me. They were like, yeah, go Katie. She cleaned up vomit. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh, just doing my job. It's okay.
You know, it's almost like I almost want to make a T-shirt now. It says "Spaceship Earth," the original vomit comet. Uh, I don't know.
Yes.
I
That
think
is
I'm gonna,
perfect.
I think we're gonna have to do that. I think I'm just gonna have to. Patent pending, copyright.
Patent pending.
There you go. There you go. Well, John actually has a good question, and I think this is actually one of those questions I think a lot of people have said. Really want to get your opinion. He asks, some would say that Disney uses college program as a way for cheap and free labor. What is your experience with that thing? And I would add to that particular comment. Did you feel that way, or was it, did you gain experience while you were obviously getting paid for your experiences there? I mean, I'm hoping you can push aside some of the misconceptions of that for the sake of the question.
I didn't feel that way whatsoever. In regards to, how I was interacting with the cast members that were working either part-time or full-time or had been there with the company for 20, 30 plus years, I felt like your typical average cast member. I didn't feel any different because I was in the college program, and the cast members down there, they do make you feel like, you are part of the team, because you are part of the same team as them. And the more that I think of it, I didn't feel like I was just chosen to be free labor or anything like that because of the way that Disney was taking care of us. They provided us with free bus transportation to every single resort and every single park, and all the backstage entrances, and that was free. They automatically took our rent out each week for our housing, and the housing complexes, I don't know if you've ever seen it before, Mr. Chris, or if anybody else in here has, they are beautiful. The rooms are fantastic. Each complex has a pool, a gym. They have multiple sections for laundry. One complex in particular called the Commons has laundry in the room itself. And they just really take care of you down there. Is the bus transportation the best? Not really. There were a couple that caught on fire when I was down there, but that's besides the point. That's besides the point, because not only did they have it for the parks and resorts, they also had them to bring you to Walmart, Publix, the malls, things like that. So you don't have to worry about, how am I going to go grocery shopping? How am I going to, grab a new outfit for going out to Disney Springs or something like that. So, and they really took care of you. And of course, you did get the amazing discount of free entry to the park or the main gate. I still keep my card just to have it, just to say I had this one time and it was fantastic. And I mean, you also get kind of like the same perks as the cast members that work there full time or part time. I mean, minus the exception with like medical insurance, health insurance, and all that other stuff. But it was great. And then the classes itself were unbelievable because the professors were people that worked for Disney in high level positions. Like my teacher for, what class was it? Corporate communications. She was one of the managers of Yacht and Beach Club. And then my human resource management professor was one of the managers and coordinators for the area of MGM where Rock and Roller Coaster and Tower of Terror are. I can't remember the name of the location off the top of my head. And when they're teaching you the different courses, they're giving their real life experience and how you can tie it into working with a career at Disney or working outside of Disney. So I feel like that was definitely the best experience ever. I didn't feel like cheap labor or anything like that whatsoever.
But it also sounds like you really took advantage of basically what Disney offered to you.
Yeah.
And you didn't sit there as a bumping a couch, so to speak, when you weren't necessarily on stage. Mm-hmm. It does sound like you had a good living experience as well. Which complex were you at by chance?
I was in Patterson Court. I really liked it. So I was in a room, including myself, with 5 girls. It was a 2-bedroom apartment. It had a full kitchen, 2 bathrooms, and we were fairly close to kind of like the security gate. They also have security there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just, to make sure that everybody's protected and safe. They also will do patrols around the complex so they don't just sit there all day. And they're really there to help you if there's anything that you need. If you're having car trouble, they're right there to help you or something like that.
Okay, so it wasn't necessarily a dorm-like experience. It was more of a real-life experience rather than anything else.
Exactly. Yes. It was crazy compared to me, who I lived in a dorm for, before that, 2.5 years. Now I lived in a dorm for 4.5 years. Compared to the apartment living in Florida, it was a completely different experience. It was nothing like the typical dorm life that I had had, because I had things like a kitchen. I had a bathroom that I only had to share with one person instead of a whole floor of people. Like, it was great. It was awesome. And the laundry was cheaper, and it wasn't cold. There was no snow. That's even better. There was no snow. And especially because that was the year when Massachusetts had, I don't even know how many feet of snow. So the joke was that my friends called me Elsa because I ran away and all this snow came and just blew Massachusetts off the map.
That is
so I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all my Boston listeners. That was me.
So since we're getting slowly up towards the top of the hour, I kind of want to just ask, okay. I think this is funny. Speaking of the cast member experience, Enrique actually asked, was there any cast member partying going on?
So there were. I never attended because when I was doing the program, I was 20, and the rules for underage drinking and things like that were so strict that if you got caught once, you were expected out the next day, everything packed up, you left the day after, they found out. So I was always trying to be on my best behavior and not do anything like that. But for the people who were 21, there's some pretty good parties. Disney, when I was still downtown Disney, when I was down there, everybody kind of flooded to House of Blues and the different clubs in and around the Orlando area. But for me, I would get out of work at 10 or 11. I wouldn't get back to my apartment until like 11 or 12. I was so tired at that point that I just slept. And I couldn't even think of partying. And then on my days off, the most like crazy things that I did were what I called Magic Kingdom Mondays, because they always had Mondays off. So after class, I would just go straight to Magic Kingdom or MGM or anything like that. So I kept it on the down low a little bit because I wanted to be good. And if anything were to happen where I got, terminated, I just would not forgive myself.
Well, I'm glad to hear that Disney kind of keeps check on that, because I know that, it's one of those cases where there are so many people that can really get themselves into a heap of trouble and they don't realize it. And, my daughter was an RA during her last year for her undergrad. Mm-hmm. And, she had to deal with students that were underage drinking and stuff like that. And she had to deal with that sort of thing. And it really quite honestly screwed up their educational career, could really mark on their life. Well, I'm glad to hear that you still obviously had a great time, a great experience without necessarily getting involved with the party scene. And I think that's pretty cool. So before we start wrapping things up, going back to the whole spring break bit, if you had to give our listeners some wisdom pieces of advice from a cast member on just, dealing with crowds, dealing with what could be a stressful, crowded type of situation at the parks, what are some of the things that you think that people should know, what kind of expectations they should have as they go into a spring break scenario?
Some of the biggest things I would say are just remember that it's going to be okay. It's going to be super stressful. There's going to be people around you. If you do need that second to kind of try to find somewhere to isolate yourself for like a couple minutes, just to take a couple deep breaths, do it, because it's going to save you for the rest of the day. Stay hydrated and just stay as positive as you can, because it's not easy, especially when, guests are being very rude or it just seems like there's no ending in sight. And the biggest thing for me, whenever I would come to a challenge where I wasn't sure what to do, I always just stopped and asked myself, what would Walt want? What would Walt do in this kind of situation? And that's the mindset that you got to have, especially when you deal with something that you're not really sure how to handle or something like that. You just have to think to yourself, how would Walt handle this? How would he want this to be handled? And if there's somebody that's just giving you such a hard time and you are fighting everything in your body not to snap, just remember, kill them with kindness. That's all you can do. And it's the best advice, because you're not being mean. You're being super nice, but then it's making them want to go away, because then they're like, why is this person so nice? And that's what I had to do a lot was, because we can't just, snap at them or be rude to them. We can't, because we'll get in trouble. So it's just, the best thing to do is you kill them with kindness. And even after all these years with the job that I have, that's the best thing you can do, is just to kill them with kindness.
So as we kind of end, I'll ask this, and I know that you and your boss listens to the show, so I know you kind of have to be careful with this question. But if given the chance to go back to Disney as a full-time cast member, would you do it?
If I didn't have to clean up bodily spells, I think I would. No, but on a serious note, I have a fantastic job right now. I'm super happy. I am currently in the process of saving up to hopefully buy a condo or a house, whether that be in Boston or in Florida. This has been, a topic that my boss and I have both discussed with each other, because she, it's come across our mind a couple times, but it's definitely not in the cards right now. In the future, who knows? I
think that's fair. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you got yourself a degree, you got yourself an awesome experience working for what is no doubt the largest entertainment company in the world, and now you have a job that is basically the beginnings of your career path that you really super enjoy. And the combination of your education plus your internship, the college program is basically an internship, really has gotten you where you're at today. And it surely sounds like, the sky's the limit for you. And it surely sounds like, you're going to be able to just roll this into something to really make a name for yourself, no matter what you do. And I'm really glad to hear it. I mean, I know the things that you learn from internships, in general. If you take them seriously and not just, I want to go work for Disney because it's a dream of mine. The fact of the matter is, it's still work. It's still hard work, and sometimes it's not always great work. And, but you learn from it from a corporate perspective. And I think that is a real big deal. So I'll tell you right now, I think that's really, really glad. I'm really glad to hear this. And I just think this has been absolutely a fabulous conversation. So I'll tell you what, we're going to go ahead and we're going to end here, but any last words for our guests today?
I will say one more thing that I always try to stress to people when they say, I want to move to Florida, I want to work at Disney or Universal or something like that, or in the theme park industry. I wish people had told me this before I went, that working there and going on vacation there are two completely different things. And it was kind of a harsh reality the first couple weeks, because I was, getting into a new routine. I was away from my family where, the best way to get to them was a 3-hour plane ride or something like that. So if it does get challenging within the first couple weeks because you're learning all these new things, you're meeting all these new people, you're trying to get used to, the speed of working in a park or a resort, that it just keeps getting better and better as, you keep moving on in the program. And then when that last day comes, I'm not going to lie, it's going to hurt. It's going to feel awful. You don't want to leave. I think I cried 4 separate times on my last day in the parks. And then I lost it completely when I was pulling out and they had just lit up the Epcot ball and I lost it. But it is an experience unlike anything else that I've ever witnessed in my entire life. And if you have been accepted to the program, just get ready for the best months of your entire life, because it's going to be, I don't even know how to put it into words. It's just, there's so many ways to describe it. It's just unbelievable. And this is the next chapter of your life, because this is where I felt like where everything was kind of falling into place and clicking. Like, this is where I should be and this is where I have to be. And a lot of kids that I worked with who after 3 years are still down there are moving up in positions where they had started out at the college program and now they're coordinators or they're managers or something like that. So if you truly feel like it's where you're meant to be, I recommend finishing school. Always finish school. If you can, finish school, please. And then get back there as fast as you can. It's the best. But but for myself personally, I wanted to finish college and then gain a lot more experience here and then just kind of reevaluate and see what I want to do. And now I just kind of want to get an annual pass, hopefully hit the lottery, move to Golden Oaks, and retire at 24.
There you go. There you go. Then we all know.
That's all we can hope.
Then we all know where we're going to stay. So that's excellent. Well, everybody, thank you so much for being here on this special Saturday edition of the Behind Yours podcast. Don't forget to go ahead and check out all of our social media page. Don't forget to catch us over at Behind Yours podcast Facebook page, the WDW community page, where we have a lot of awesome conversations that is totally completely drama free. You can catch us over at Twitter, Behind the Ears PC, Instagram, Behind the Ears Podcast. Of course, our email is behindtheearspodcast@gmail.com. And of course, you can always catch our website over at behindtheearspodcast.net. Don't forget to like and review the show over at iTunes. You can also like our individual episodes over at the Podbean app, which everybody says it is one of the best that they've ever used. Don't forget to like the show wherever you see the show. You can also listen to it over at iTunes, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, over at iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and ask Alexa to play it as well. She's listening. So or you can ask anything from home, Google Play, basically wherever podcasts can be listened to, you'll find us there. So thank everybody. Thanks again for joining us on this morning. We hope to do another coffee program sometime soon. I will definitely say that we will let people know when those come up. But until we meet again, I hope everybody has a magical day. Take care.
Yay!